about it and tell you some things that we've learned. But I thought at the beginning I might ask if there's anyone in here who teaches EU law. First of all, let me introduce myself a little bit more, and then I'll introduce Jessica, and then I'll tell you a few things about the European Union. I graduated from law school almost 25 years ago now, and at that time, I had no idea what was going on in Europe. I went to law school in Kansas, and this wasn't something that anybody there talked about. The most that I knew about Europe was the fact that my father was involved in the D-Day invasion, and 61 years ago Monday, and that's about all I knew about it. But for me, Europe was a long ways off. As I got into my legal career, which lasted a fairly short period of time, I practiced law for about a year, and then I worked for a former governor of Kansas 2 years. I found myself much more interested in policy issues than I did in substantive legal issues. And in my case, that was fine, because I have a sister who practices law, and if I have any legal problems, I just turn them over to her. She knows a lot more than I will ever about it. But in the early 80s, I got involved with publishing and was a publisher for McGraw-Hill for about 10 years. And after that, was a publisher for Reed Elsevier. I was on the Elsevier side. I mean, many of you, I'm sure all of you know, that LexisNexis is owned by Reed Elsevier. And I was on the Elsevier side, which publishes mostly scientific and policy journals, primarily for social scientists, academics, not so much lawyers. In that role, I first worked in the United States, but subsequently I moved to England and was at Oxford. I was there for several years at the end of the 1990s. While I was there, and I know this sounds a bit strange, but I didn't really have anything to do after work or on the weekends. I mean, I had no home there. I lived in a guest house and had no responsibilities. So I found out about an LLM in EU law from one of the major law schools in England, and I enrolled in it and was accepted and finished that course, and as part of that became very interested in the EU and what's going on. I can tell all of you, and I'm sure that many of you may appreciate this, Europe is the largest economic market in the world. And I constantly run into people who are from Denver. And say, that cannot be true. That just can't be true. But the fact of the matter, it is. On all sorts of levels, the Europeans are setting standards. Environmental standards, product safety standards, cosmetic standards, all kinds of standards that as they become implemented into law will mean that companies all over the world will be following European standards and not American standards. Now that's not to say that European standards are better than American standards, but if you're a lawyer and you're going to represent an American client or an American business, and you don't know about what's going on in the largest market in the world, and perhaps the most influential legislature in the world, the European Parliament, you're not representing your client very well. So at the end of 2000, I had a choice to either stay in London and to continue to work, or for the publishing company, or to come back to Denver. And to some extent, I mean, in all of our lives, there are things we would like to do, but reality creeps in, and you know, the things that you really should do. And so I moved back to Denver in August of 2000. But I came back with this feeling that something was going on in Europe, and not very many people in the U.S. seemed to fully appreciate what that was. And so I approached the EU Law School and was able to, very kindly, they hired me to teach EU law and a number of other things. And now, beginning in the December of 2002 to January 2003, and up through the class I'm going to show you today, this will be the 6th time we've taught, we collectively, all the people at DU, have taught European Union law. And this, we started out with a very modest group of students, I think maybe, I can't remember, 18 or 20. And this summer, we have 53 students from 6 law schools across the greater Rocky Mountain West. We'll have students who will take this class from Europe, as well as all across the United States. When I say take it from Europe, they're spending their summer in Europe, so they can take the course online wherever they are. I've been really fortunate because Jessica Hogan, who's the manager of the Educational Technology Department, when I began to work at DU, Jessica and I worked on a number of projects together. We hadn't really known each other. And I found that she and her department, 2 members who are here, Joan Pope and Carrie Mahan Gross, who have helped immensely on a lot of these projects, were very enthusiastic about the whole idea as well. And so we sort of set off as a group. I mean, in some sense, I am the face of the European Union law course at DU because I'm the face the students see. But the reality is there are all these people behind the scenes who make things go. And even today, even a few minutes ago, I was answering some questions to some of the students, and I think maybe Jessica answered a question or 2 as well this afternoon. So it's sort of this ongoing and organized approach. Jessica's background is she's a graduate of the University of Arizona with a bachelor's degree and a law degree from U of A, and is licensed to practice in Arizona. And while she was in law school, became a student representative, I guess, for Westlaw. She was hired afterwards and worked for West for a number of years, visiting law schools in the Rocky Mountains and in the west of the U.S. And in 1998 came to DU and has had a number of positions there, including the one she holds right now as manager of educational technology. And if there's nothing else that I should emphasize about this course, it is that what you'll see is really a reflection of what everyone in Jessica's department has done, what I've tried to do, and what others' advice we have gotten from a lot of people. One of the people early on I talked to was Peter Martin at Cornell Law School, and I felt that I'm just an adjunct at DU. I do some writing and I edit some journals when I'm not at DU, but I thought it would be very useful to talk to someone who is a true pioneer in online education, and clearly there's no one who fits that role better than Peter Martin. So I talked to him, he encouraged me, he gave me some ideas, and Jessica, her team, and I got together, tried some things, and what you'll see now is quite a bit different from what it was on that first offering several years ago. Just a word about the European Union. You may have heard about it last week, in particular because France and the Netherlands, in separate referendums, voted to reject the ratification of the new EU Constitution. What does that mean for European Union law? Well, to be honest with you, it means very little, because the underlying treaties of Europe that govern Europe, the case law, the statutes, are all in place. Europe goes on today just as it did last week. Clearly there's political anxiety in Europe about what this vote means. But I can tell you what it doesn't mean. And it doesn't mean that the EU is going to quit being an effective government in the next few days. As I said, there are leaders on environmental issues, leaders on product safety issues, leaders on chemical regulation issues, leaders on climate change, and they want to be leaders in the common foreign and security policy. But as most of us know, or if everyone in here is from the U.S. and watched what happened in the last couple of years with Europe, the United States, and Iraq, I mean, we all know that Europe doesn't speak with one voice, at least at this point, on foreign policy issues. So, in terms of the course itself, I mean, the EU is alive and well. The class, Jessica and I began to work on this in the fall of 2002. The then Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at DU, Jay Brown, I'm not exactly sure what happened, but he talked to me and he talked to Jessica about putting together an online course. This was in about October of 2002. And he wanted to have the course run from mid-December to mid-January during the interterm time. Historically at DU, no courses had been offered during that period of time And so Jay's idea was, let's offer and see what happens. We had about 18 or 20 students, as I recall, and looking back, it was, from my standpoint, it was a bit of a ragtag performance on my part, because I immediately got behind with the grading of papers. You'll see that there's a lot of papers to be graded in a course like this. And I could never really catch up, and so the students never got any feedback from the beginning of the course to the end of the course, which is not unusual in other law school courses, but in an online course, it wasn't something we wanted to, it was something we wanted to change as we went along. So the first offering was in the interterm 2002-2003. Then the summer of 2003, the interterm of 2003-2004, summer 2004, interterm 2004-2005. This past spring, we did a special course on European Union environmental law, which is not the course I'll be showing you, but the structure is just the same. And now the summer of 2005, we've grown from 18 or 20 students to more than 50. In putting together the course online, you might ask, why are you even doing this? And it was a question that I think we ask ourselves. And I think to some degree it reflects the backgrounds of the people who were involved in this effort. From my standpoint, having worked as a publisher for McGraw-Hill and Elsevier, what I knew was that if one is conducting business or legal affairs or policy affairs, the likelihood that you're going to sit down every single day and in the office next to you is going to be your client or the opposition or somebody else, that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, we all work in a virtual setting. And when I was at Elsevier, lots of times when I was in America, I was working on things that needed to be done in Europe. And when I was in Europe, I was working on things that needed to be done in America. And then, of course, there were projects that needed to be done with people in China. Well, I never stepped foot in China. And there wasn't any need to with respect to the role that I was playing, because we could do everything over the internet. And so when I came to the law school, I thought about the paradigm of how lawyers do work, or maybe how they were taught, certainly how they were taught when I went to law school, and the reality now. And one of the skills that I think is very important, it clearly is important in a business setting, is for people to be able to work at a distance, on their own, to follow directions, and to work collaboratively. So we tried to capture those things. We also wanted to put the responsibility for the learning on the students. And people have different feelings about that. When I was in England getting my LLM, it wasn't at all, I mean, the teaching wasn't at all like when I was in law school here. I came into a room like this every day. The teacher lectured. If the teacher had stood up there and said, well, it's up to all of you to do the readings and tell me what you're learning, I mean, we would have all fallen over dead, because I was there to be spoon-fed, and that's what I expected. When I went to England, it was just the other way around. I mean, the professors were all quite nice and everything, as were the American professors, but they basically said the responsibility is up to you. Here are the assignments, here are the readings, we're here to help you, there are some lectures, there are things that they would help do to support us in our learning, but ultimately it was up to you to be self-disciplined and to be careful about budgeting your time. And to me, that had a profound, was a profound experience for me, because rather than the teacher sort of leading the whole learning effort, to a large degree, the students were expected to do that themselves. Now, this is just one course, and none of us pretend that all law schools should be like this one course. But in the context of what we're trying to do, we think it's worked pretty well. Well, finally, about the way the course is set up. And as you'll see, there's a lot of Europeans who rotate in and out of this course in different ways. For me, if you're teaching a course on the European Union, do you want to listen to a guy who grew up in Kansas City? I mean, is that satisfactory? I can tell you about the Kansas City Chiefs, Kansas City Royals. They both are terrible. I can tell you about, Swope Park in Kansas City. But the fact of the matter is, that I can introduce students to the ideas, but ultimately it is much better for them to learn from Europeans, who I work with and in concert with, than to hear everything from me. And maybe that is a new idea. I think it's not. I mean, if we were studying Colorado domestic relations law having a judge from Europe talk about Colorado domestic relations law doesn't make any sense. But that's not what we're doing here. We're talking about Europe. We're trying to give the students an opportunity to interact with some Europeans. The kinds of people, Europeans who have been involved with the course: professors, think tank officials, EU officials from Brussels. Probably the most prominent person we've ever had involved, a fellow named David Edward, former judge on the European Court of Justice. The European Court of Justice is analogous to our U.S. Supreme Court. We've had business leaders. We've had a journalist, all playing different roles at different times. And my role is to coordinate their involvement. When are they coming in and out of the course? What are they going to do? What would we like them to do? From an academic standpoint, I think that when students, and Jessica, I think we'll talk a little bit more about this when she talks about student assessments, this is a very rigorous course. I think that in some instances people might say, and all of you may have had experience with this, that, oh, an online course, this will be easy. I don't have to go to class. I only know what I'm doing. Actually, this is a very rigorous course. And I don't know this for a fact now, but hopefully after this fall I will, because we're going to study this. I would contend that students who take this course learn more about the European Union than students who take my on-site course at the University of Denver, where I teach the same content, but I teach it in a much more traditional style. So we'll tell you more about that later in the year. This particular summer, sort of the cross-cultural experiences we'll have a Swedish journalist, Marcus Oskarsson, will talk to us from Sweden, or as I have begun to call him, Professor Oskarsson, because he really works the students. I mean, he's a very, very nice guy, but Swedes or Scandinavians tend to be direct, and he really sort of asks students what they think about various things. We'll also have a Swiss lawyer, Denise Brugger, who works for Swiss Re, one of the large insurance companies, maybe one of the largest in the world. We'll have two English men. One, Jeff Kenner, who is a professor at the University of Nottingham, teaches European Union law there. The other Englishman being Michael Shackleton, who is an official with the European Parliament. He'll come to us by video. We'll have a Scotsman, David Edward, who I mentioned just a few minutes ago, this former justice on the European Court of Justice. And we will have a German who works at the European Commission. And just to sort of tell you just a short story about why I think this is all really important, what we're doing, and the topic. This German guy is a guy named Stefan Simon, and Stefan and I got acquainted at this LLM in England. He was taking it, and I was taking it at the same time, and we really didn't know each other very well, but because my last name is Smith, his last name is Simon, we sometimes sat next to each other. And one day we were talking about where we were from, and he told me this town in Germany where he was from. And that town rang a bell. And I went back and I sort of thought about it, and I asked my father, do you recognize this town? And he said, yes, I recognize that town. That is a town where I got shot in the war. So, you know, here we're sons of two families from two different sides in World War II. Me from the United States, Stefan Simon from Europe, from Germany. And yet, 60 years on, the sons of these, I don't know who shot my father, I mean, obviously. But to me, I was quite struck by the fact that how time has changed and how time can change things, and why what is going on in Europe is so important. Because all over this world, of course, we see disturbances everywhere. And if anyone can point in the 20th century to a more difficult and contentious relationship than the Germans and the French, you're really doing something. So to me, that's what this course is about, giving people opportunities to deal with people they wouldn't ever deal with before. The course, let me begin to get into some of this. The documents we provide for the students are provided in Word, and we put them on the website, and then the students download the documents. This is the calendar for the course, and the calendar, the course began on May 31st, and over here I tell them what the topic is for that week. And then as we go down, each week has a module, and I'll talk to you about the modules in just a second, but a module, and then various things happen during the week, assignment 1, assignment 2. So by looking at this document, they know precisely what is due when. Now, in the course that I teach on site, of course, I give them a calendar as well. But by about the third period, the calendar is completely changed because we've gotten behind, we've gotten ahead. But in this course, I stick right with it. It's not fair for somebody to sign up at the beginning and then for me to go in and say, oh, well, we're not going to do that this way, we're going to change it. So this is the calendar. This particular course will end with a video conference on August the 4th. Again, this is another one of our efforts to give students a cross-cultural opportunity. The students will be talking to, hearing speak, Alan Charlton, who is the Deputy UK Ambassador to the United States. He'll be in Washington. Some of the students will be in Denver, and the rest of the students will be other places. So that's the calendar. The syllabus has two parts. Part 1 is the administrative part of it. And this is where I give them details about the course. Just to point out a few things. Something we found is very important is that students have to know what they're getting into. I mean, they can always drop the course, but I want to be fair about what they're getting into. So we talk about some important factors to consider when taking a web-based course. We say the course will require the same commitment of time, study, and effort as a typical on-site one-semester course. Now, I think we'll know after we do this research this summer and this fall exactly what that time commitment is. This summer, each student will write approximately 15,000 words of different kinds of essays, different kinds of reports, and journal entries to me. I never had a law school class where, well, I can't remember where we even had anything that was 2,000 or 3,000 words. Most of the things were tests. But so I know exactly who's doing what and how much time they're putting into it. They must be able to work independently and organize their time. It doesn't work very well for somebody to get into this and get behind quickly, because if you get behind quickly, from a student's standpoint, it's difficult to catch up. We also require them to have DSL or some sort of a cable hookup. Because the content is so much more rich now than what it was at the beginning, you need that fast internet access. Then I tell them about the course structure. Essentially the time frame, the organization of the course, which we'll look at in a second, discussion boards, right here, the required reading. I assign a book. And the reason I assign a book is that I think to some extent in a virtual world, you can think that, we can all think that something may not have as much value if it's not in a book. Now, despite the fact that there's a lot on the web, the fact is that there's a lot of things that aren't on the web, and I am constantly amazed by students, and all of you know this, I'm sure, much better than I do. People who will go to Google, type something in, just find some website somewhere, and cite that as authority for some point, when I know there've got to be 500 journal articles on the same thing. And I was reading a paper this morning coming up here from Denver. Somebody's writing about climate change. I'll bet, I don't know, there've got to be at least 500 law journal articles on climate change. I'm just guessing. This person didn't cite one. They cited Wikipedia and some site that when I went to check it was a site put up by the nuclear power industry. What does anybody think the nuclear power industry is going to say about climate change? I mean, that's not legit research. Although I have been challenged on that. And then the part that students are most interested in, grading and assessment. In this course, there will be 6 written assignments. The first assignment will be worth 10 points, and the next 5 will be worth 12 points each to get to 70 points. On those assignments, I'm looking for clarity, their ability to express themselves, the ability to identify issues and to discuss what the readings and any materials they found are, So that's 70 points. Participation on discussion boards is 15%. You'll see some of our discussion boards in a second. And participation in a group project, and this involves preparing groups to get ready to ask questions to the Deputy Ambassador, is 15 points. The last one is a new one, and this thanks, the reason I'm doing this is in large measure due to another colleague of ours, David Thompson from the University of Denver, who has really done some fantastic and pioneering work from my perspective in this area of collaborative group projects. So that is syllabus part 1. Syllabus part 2 is where the students actually see what what they're expected to read, what they're expected to get out of it. So each module is essentially a topic. The first one is history from war to union and the transatlantic relationship. The transatlantic relationship from war to union aren't necessarily related, but I think it is very important in this course for students to be following the transatlantic relationship, and we need to start very early. A couple of days ago, Tony Blair was at the White House talking to the President. At the end of this month, European leaders will be coming to Washington to talk to the President. And in July, there'll be a G8 meeting in Gleneagle, Scotland. Which G8 is not an EU meeting, but a lot of EU countries there, Italy, France, Germany, the United Kingdom. And so this whole course plays out in the context of transatlantic relations. Just in the last few weeks, the Airbus-Boeing dispute that's been going on. Microsoft. I mean, a question that I constantly ask myself is, Microsoft, what are they thinking about in dealing with the Europeans? And it has to do with anti-competitive behavior that the Europeans claim Microsoft is engaged in. Well, Microsoft could say, we won't sell any more products in Europe, but guess what Microsoft's biggest market in the world is? It's the European Union. So every single day there are issues involving America and Europe. So the first part of every module is my identification of the key themes. These are the themes that I think they should take away. In all their reading, they should keep these things in mind. Then there's the reading assignment. Here is the assignment from the book. This is a web link to a famous speech that Winston Churchill gave. Winston Churchill in Zurich in 1946, calling for the development of the United States of Europe. Here's an article, an ABA journal article. If they click on that, they will be taken to another screen, which prompts them to go into Westlaw, because that article is on Westlaw. This is a very seminal piece by Robert Kagan, who has written a lot about the European-American relationship. An article from The Economist. And finally, an article from a database maintained by the European Union Studies Association, which is a group of American academics and some Europeans who take a look at. So I'll just click on this just to, oh, wait a minute. Well, if you click on that, you will go there. I don't know whether you'll go there from this machine, but you will go there. I wonder why isn't that open? I guess maybe I'll say no. All right, okay. I also have put together a course introduction streaming video, and we'll just watch a minute of it. We don't need to watch the whole thing. But I put this together with some other people in Jessica's department. And we always begin with this European Union national anthem. Welcome to European Union Law and Policy. I'm delighted to have each of you in this course, and I look forward to getting to know you better. There's never been a better or more interesting time to study about the European Union. So there is not a day that goes by when some issue isn't basically the same thing I've been talking about. So, So, let me just go back here. So there will be in every module, there will be some audio. Here's another one. This video is from the European Commission. It's about Jean Monnet, a Frenchman who is referred to as the father of Europe. Here is a streaming audio to Bush stresses importance of European ties. It was on NPR. And another one, the Lair News Hour. You know, what I try to do is identify all the audio and video I could possibly get my hands on, and then we build links. I mean, all these are links into these other sites. I mean, the interview with me was on DU's site.
So is there a growing chasm in policy, politics, and public opinion between the United States and its European allies? We take a look at what's at stake with Robert Kagan, a senior associate at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Robin Niblett,
So I sort of continue to just come back to that. So in any case, what we try to do is have audio, video, some for every module. Then there are some optional ones. And I put these optional ones in because I want to see what the students are reading. I want to give them plenty of materials to respond to their writing assignment. And so if they want to look at these, I mean, that is tipping me off. If they cite these in their paper, this is tipping me off to the fact that this particular person really took the assignment seriously. Here's a couple of optional ones. One about the Airbus 350, which is just kind of a fun one, and another one which is not fun, about the new monument near the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. Then helpful websites and so on. Now, in Module 1, we didn't have a writing assignment because it's coming in Module 2. In Module 2, again, I tell them about what they're going to be getting into. I give them links to the statutes or to the treaty establishing Europe. There are other links. These are all links coming from the European Union itself. Something that we've been very fortunate, if any of you listen to NPR, you might occasionally hear Tom Reed, T.R. Reed, is a reporter for the Washington Post. And in the late 90s, T.R. was the bureau chief for the Washington Post in London. And he lives in Denver now. His wife is a lawyer in Denver, and T.R. has taken over the Washington Post's Rocky Mountain assignment. And he lives about a mile from the law school. And he's been great. He has done a number of videos with me, and here's a video that he gave at the law school last year, a lecture he gave. And here's assignment 1. Assignment 1 is 2 parts. First, identify 2 key events in the evolution, explain what made each of them important. Second, is it important for the U.S. and EU to maintain a strong transatlantic relationship? If so, why? If not, why not? And what I'm expecting is that they will answer those 2 questions based on all the readings. There is not a perfect answer in the sense that a right or wrong answer, but what I am looking is to see the process that they went through to get to their answer. If they only cite one of all the references, all the resources I gave them, then I frankly conclude that this person didn't do a very good and a very thorough job. On the other hand, some students will cite all of them and will get more. And so that's fairly impressive. How they submit the assignments, and I give them the date that it is due. The writing assignment should be submitted to the Dropbox. The Dropbox being right here. They can upload all their assignments to the DU server, and then when those assignments arrive, I get an email saying a student's paper has arrived. So from an administration standpoint, for me, it makes it a lot easier, because rather than having 40 or 50 emails one after another from the students, I I can get all the papers at one time from the website. But the students put down their name, although you'd be amazed. I mean, these directions look fairly simple, but sometimes people don't seem to be able to follow. Their address, the assignment. So we've got all the assignments here. Attach the assignment. And then if they want to write me a note, they can do that. Sometimes they'll say something like, I didn't understand this point or that point, or, you know, I'm sorry this is one day late, I had an emergency, or something along those lines. But this is very good, and it makes the administration much easier. The streaming video, I wanted to show you one of the other things that we've done. We initiated a series of video interviews with Judge David Edward, this fellow I've mentioned several times. Judge Edward, a Scotsman himself, was on the court for 15 years and was involved in 1,300 decisions. And this video, we'll see him.
However, he is also a man who seeks out the views of others. End quote.
Let me. I just want to get through my part so you can see.
Of the court was a natural part of the system put in place by the original Coal and Steel Treaty and continued thereafter into the subsequent treaties, the Economic Treaty and the Atomic Energy Treaty. Even in the early days with the coal and steel community, the Court of Justice was faced with what you might call constitutional issues.
Yeah, it's a great.
What was the nature of this animal that had been created?
And it's fascinating to listen to, but just to give you a sense, here's a lecture that the judge gave in April at DU. Here's a lecture on just an overview of competition policy, internal market policy. And we have another one on environmental policy, but environmental policy isn't part of this course. So what I've tried to do in every instance is, in every module where there is an issue dealing with, say, competition law, which is their version of antitrust law, or internal market law, which is kind of like their UCC, the students can watch Judge Edward. I have asked him the questions, so I know exactly what he's going to say. But the format we use is much more a format that would be, at least to me, analogous to what you might see on C-SPAN or the Laird News Hour, as opposed to, you know, Chris Matthews. And the judge knows exactly what I'm going to ask him. He gives me ideas about questions I should ask him. He's very eloquent, and I think that this has added a huge amount to this course. So far as I know, and I may be wrong about this, but no other law school in the U.S. has this kind of coverage with a European judge. And so far as I know, no European law school has this kind of coverage. So I mention that because we've made a real effort to try to interview some of these people. It takes time, and it certainly takes a lot of effort, but I think it's well worth it. Here are some other interviews. T.R. Reed. T.R. and I talked last Thursday because I wanted to get his expertise. He wrote a book called The United States of Europe that was on the New York Times bestseller list earlier this year, and he was interviewed by Terry Gross. He gave, on NPR's Fresh Air, TR gave me one word of advice. If you ever write a book, try to get on Terry Gross's program, because apparently his sales went through the roof after he was on her program. He got to the bestseller list. But anyway, I wanted to ask TR about France and the Netherlands voting against the referendum. Last Thursday morning, he called me up. Well, actually, last Wednesday afternoon, he called me up and said, could we do it on Thursday morning? And I called a fellow who works for Jessica and said, could we do it? He said, yeah, let's do it at 11 a.m. the next morning. We did it. It was digitized, and it was on the website about 3 p.m. last Thursday afternoon. This is a former member of the European Parliament, Richard Balfe, Stefan Simon, the German guy who I mentioned. And then there's a whole lot of other videos, depending on what one is interested in. I'm not here to say that the course is entirely built on videos, but to some extent, there's no way that I can have these people come to Denver and talk to these students. I mean, first of all, most of the students are not in Denver. And secondly, it's not realistic to think that Stefan Simon, David Edward, Richard Balfe are all going to come to Denver just to do a video interview. Most of these people I interviewed in Europe, although not all of them. A few other things we have on the website. We have a research video that was put together with Martha Keister, the International Law Librarian at DU. We have a European Union research guide, a document that Martha put together about how to do research on directives, regulations, and so on. We also have speeches, press releases, student opportunities. And one of the newest things we've done is for this summer's classes, I asked students to submit pictures of themselves, which obviously I could see, but their classmates could see as well. So the roster begins with DU students, and then goes down to University of Idaho, University of Las Vegas, Nevada, or University of Nevada, Las Vegas, University of New Mexico, Washburn, and the University of Wyoming. I think that one of the things we've learned in the course is that the students are very keen on seeing pictures and seeing videos. Not so much because I think they want to be entertained necessarily, but my impression is in some of the reading that I've done is that a video, the impact of a video can be much more substantial than just reading it in text or hearing it, because people can actually see you as well, sort of see what your mannerisms are. When we first started this course in December of 2002, we didn't have any videos. And the next summer, I think I did one video. I introduced the course. And afterwards, some of the students told me, we really liked that video because it gave us a chance to see you and hear you. And I was sort of shocked by that. I mean, we all live in a virtual world. What difference does it make? But the difference apparently it seemed to make was that they thought that after they saw me and saw sort of my mannerisms and I guess to some extent what my personality was like, they felt like I was more approachable. I mean, we haven't done any scientific research on that, but that's what they told me, and that's what we're trying to do with this. The course discussion boards. The discussion boards are ongoing. They're not blogs, but they're discussions, threaded discussions about various issues going on in Europe. Up here at the top, class announcements. It occurred to me, actually at lunchtime here, that there might be some questions about the first assignment and when they would get responses from me, and so I just posted something. These are basically just administrative announcements. Frequently asked questions here. The first discussion was for people to introduce themselves. 69 postings. In coming weeks, we will have 2 concurrent discussions, EU politics, led by Marcus Oscarson, EU enlargement, led by Denise Brugger, and then Marcus and Denise will switch and do it again, but in smaller groups. We'll also have a discussion on the internal market that will be led by Jeff Kenner, who's the law professor at the University of Nottingham in England. I started an ongoing discussion on the EU Constitution late last week. And some of this is unbelievable. This is 1 week. Now, just because 460 people have read this doesn't necessarily mean anything. But 57 postings. And this is interesting. Here's our man in Sweden, Marcus. And I was looking at this at noon. Marcus posted something at noon, this is Mountain Time, answering some students' questions about Russia. And he also, in his postings, oftentimes he will ask specific students to reply to something that they have posted. I've told Jessica, I mean, we're really lucky to have this guy. because he loves this constant interaction with the students. And essentially what I've asked him to do is to tell students about the European perspective on some of these issues. Now, I mean, if somebody in the United States asks us, we'll give the American perspective on Iraq or Social Security or something like that. It's much more nuanced than that, and we know that. But Marcus knows that as well. So he will tell the students that the Southern Europeans feel a certain way, the Northern Europeans feel a different way, and the Eastern Europeans, the new countries, the Czech Republic, Hungary, and so on, they might feel a different way. So I think it's very interesting, and as you can see, there's an enormous amount of interest. Here is another one on China and the United States. These are all student postings. Marcus posts something, and he mentions a couple of students that he's sending it to. And then, students will ask Marcus questions, and Marcus will answer their questions. And then I posted something here at noon about the EU and China and the U.S. So this is a very, I think, powerful way to give students an opportunity to have some cross-cultural interaction with other Europeans. Now, what we're working on right now, but we don't have done quite yet, is we'd like to have some live chats, where at a certain time in Sweden, Marcus would be available, and we would tell the students across our network, if you want to have a conversation with Marcus Oscarsson, it's at 1 p.m. Central Time, 12 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, 11 a.m. California Time, or Pacific Time. So this is, and I think a couple of things before I ask Jessica to say some things about student assessment. Some evolutionary steps in the process of developing the course. In the first offering, I gave no feedback to any of the students. I was just overwhelmed with the number of papers I was getting. And by number of papers, I mean, for example, this summer you take 50 students at 1,250 words per student once a week for 6 weeks. Now, I'll tell you next week whether I'm able to read these or not. But I mean, that's more than 60,000 words a week. Now, whether I can do that, we had no idea we were going to have so many students. I mean, that's one of the things we've learned. In the second offering, the feedback begins. Every student, every week, for every assignment, gets a personalized response from me telling them what they could have done to improve their paper. And I found something about that when students begin to expect that to happen, I mean, once you introduce them to that, you cannot get them away from it. And they want it back immediately. Not in a demanding way, but if all the papers are due on Saturday night, and on Monday night, 48 hours later, some of the students haven't heard, they will write me. Did you get my paper? And so I've had to kind of get them to thinking that this is not immediate turnaround, because somebody has got to read those papers. I've got 2 cats, and they read some of the papers, and I read some of the papers. But we can't read all the papers, in one 48-hour period. And the other really important evolutionary step is the involvement of more Europeans. Professors, Judge David Edward, who wrote me earlier this week and told me, these are his words, that he's very worried about what's going on in Europe. And he thinks that what you were doing in the U.S., I'm assuming what he's referring to in this class, is very important because people just don't understand Europe. So that has been sort of the evolution. We've learned a lot of things. And now let me have Jessica say some things about what the students have said about the course.
I'm just going to talk for just a very few minutes here about some of our student surveys that we did for this course. The faculty were interested to see how this would go over. They were very interested. So we created our first online survey ever at DU. and we administered the survey online. We had a pretty high response rate. And I just want to show you the first few bits of feedback we got from the first offering, and then there are a couple more slides that are a composite of the rest of the surveys. Most of the students liked this course. Dawn mentioned it was the first interterm course that we offered, and the number one thing they mentioned was flexibility. They thought that was really good. And even though they didn't get feedback from Dawn, law students aren't used to getting really feedback until their final grade, and nobody really mentioned that in this survey. You see that about a third of the students thought this was too fast, and that was because in this first course there were 8 assignments in 4 weeks, and that is a lot of work. I think one of the keys to the students liking this class was that it was very well organized for them. It was set out pretty clearly with the syllabus and the web page. They thought the course was very challenging overall, and they would recommend that others take the class, so they really seemed to like it. So I guess we see here that we were just starting the outside experts in this first course, but of the students who rated that, they said that that was really helpful, so we really bolstered that offering in subsequent courses. And it was key to me that the students found the website easy to navigate, because that's what I was doing and my department was doing, was the website portion of the course for Don Smith. We didn't have a lot of media offerings, but of those who did use them, they found them useful. And so we, again, offered more of those in subsequent courses. The students accessed the website fairly frequently in that first interterm course. This is self-reporting. Okay, and this is sort of an amalgamation of the subsequent online surveys that we did for the class. I think it's interesting for an online class that the students are saying that the professor is willing to assist them outside of class, and I think that's the feedback that Don is giving them now, the pretty constant feedback for each assignment. I think that there's probably a correlation here too with higher bandwidth at home and increased usage of the streaming media. We know that that's correlated. And any disadvantages listed in all of the surveys pretty much revolved around the technology involved in the class. Couldn't get the media file to open or that kind of thing. Students, again, liked the organization and found the class just overall enjoyable, have found the classes overall to be pretty enjoyable. And then these are just some overall conclusions that we've come to with this class. Students think it's more rigorous than they originally thought it was going to be. And they thought it was well organized, and I think that's one of the reasons they liked it. And the professor is responsive and available to them.
I sort of went on and on much longer than I thought, but if you have any questions, I mean, we'd be glad to answer them. But one thing before you leave is that if any of you are interested in maybe having this class offered to your students, and your university isn't going to offer it, let me know or write me an email, and because we're going to offer this again at the interterm. It'll be it'll be faster, content the same, but a faster pace, and we'll also offer it next summer. So students who are, might not be on your campus or might have a medical condition or something like that, just want to keep on going, or if you're interested, let us know. We've got 6 other universities involved in it now. Last summer, 8 University of New Mexico students did it, so we're fairly certain that the model works for all these other universities, and so I'd be glad to talk to you about that. And if you have any questions other than why did France vote against the referendum, I can't answer that. Anybody want to ask about the euro? I tried to, when I first started at DU, the exchange rate was about 1 to 1. And since I teach European Union law, I went to the dean and asked her if I could get paid in euros. Because the euro now, of course, is about $1.20 to each euro. It would have made 20%, but she wasn't keen on that. Yeah.
Are your videos housed on the university server?
I think so.
They are. We have a separate streaming media server that we have the videos. All of our videos are housed there. So they're not hitting web servers going on top of that.
And what was your development time?
Well, I mean, the course that you're seeing now, it's evolved over the course of time. So it's a little bit hard to say because this is about 3 years worth of work, not all the time, but incrementally as we've moved along. What I would like to do, the next big step that we're talking about that we'd like to do is to be able to do these live video conferences. There's between Denver and Brussels, there's 8 hours difference. We would like to do live video conferences from people at the commission that would be fed into Denver, and then once into Denver, I can say this because I'm not the person that has to make this happen, then rebroadcast out through the web to other law schools around the U.S. So we could get an official from the commission who could be speaking to students live at that time. We're not quite there yet. But, anyway, if you have any interest, let me know, and we'd be glad to talk to you. And you can go into the discussion board and post anything you want. Some of the students have, I guarantee you. Anyway, thanks.